we have an interesting sort of quagmire in the world right now because there are so many people who are, um, what's the word I'm going to look for here? Sort of justice, humanitarian focused, who are crying out about this current situation. And from a biblical perspective, help us understand the difference between um, a war with Palestine or Palestinians, I should say, and a war with Hamas, because these are two very different things. And I think I want people to know, I think everybody wants people to know that we don't, because we say we stand with Israel, does not mean that we stand against Arabs or Palestinians. We stand with Israel in her right to defend herself against this evil which has been perpetrated against her. And I think there's people are having a hard time with this right now. So help us biblically with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me start this in the same way. Hopefully, this will be helpful to you. Do you think you, as a listener, as a watcher of this podcast, can possibly love the people that identify themselves as Palestinians more than God does? No, right? We do. We can. We can. We can love to the extent with which we have been loved. That is what Scripture says. And thankfully, He has loved us so much in that He sent His only Son to take our place in the courtroom on our behalf. And
Right.
to the Bible actually says, to the measure that you have been forgiven, it will be forgiven you. Right? That's why the Lord's Prayer says, forgive, as if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. And so these precious civilians caught up in what is going on now in Gaza is tragic. And every single one of those lives matters, and God sees the lives of all of those
Amen.
Palestinian civilians that are being kept in Gaza by the Hamas regime. This is important to note. Israel is not targeting civilians at all. They have a great value for life. Their mantra is to save a life is to save the world. Whenever there is a natural disaster anywhere in the world, usually they are the first or at the last second or third quickest responders into a disaster situation to help countries, and they've done that all over the world. They do not want to kill indiscriminately, and they're not. They have dropped thousands upon thousands of leaflets, as they always do whenever they target Gaza. They have instructed and given weeks for civilians to get out of the area that they want to ensure they get control of. Hamas is a different story. Hamas's charter, and again, if you watch America and the Israel Effect, we'll unpack this, is an entity that their constitution, I think is the easiest way to describe it, defines multiple times that their primary purpose, I wouldn't say it's their sole purpose, but their primary purpose is to destroy the Jews simply for being Jews, to carry out ethnic cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
Israel, that's not their heart. They are wanting to deal with something that is indiscriminately targeted civilians, beheading babies, kidnapping 249 elderly women and children, and taking them into a labyrinth of tunnels underneath. Their headquarters are underneath a hospital, which violates all international law, which means that actually Israel has been hamstrung in actually dealing with the headquarters of this organization.
Mm-hmm.
But to help us grapple with that as well, we have to understand that the word Hamas actually in Hebrew means violence. It means cruelty. And so we're not dealing with an entity that values life in the same way that you do. Jihad, in the Hamas definition of it within their constitution, is the greatest calling one can have. To die carrying out jihad, martyrdom, is a high calling. And coming out of this situation, there was a 43-minute video that was shown to journalists that no media has been brave enough to put out, which was explaining and giving illustrations of, for example, one of the Hamas terrorists that went into Israel, put his mum on camera. Look at all the Jews I've killed, mum. My reward's going to be great. You know, and you just think that is so horrendous and heinous that would be your motivation, and that you would call your mum to celebrate that is beyond my comprehension. I wouldn't I couldn't dream of celebrating something like that. But yet the value within Hamas's world system and what they believe in their constitution is that this has a high calling. There's actually a greater reward for killing on Muslims' holiest day than other days of the week. They believe that there is a greater reward depending on how many Jews they actually kill. Okay, so we have an entity that doesn't care whether it's a Jewish soldier or a Jewish child or a Jewish mother. They just want to have been one that gets things. And then you want to kind of unpack a little bit further. So within their reward system, in the current Hamas structure and the PLO structure, they actually pay terrorists that are in prison in Israeli prisons who have carried out terrorist attacks greater stipends based on how many Jews they killed.
Right.
And it's hard. How can you possibly get your head around that practically when you realize that this is an entity that doesn't think the way the West thinks and doesn't see the same value system as the West values? Now, once we begin to recognize that there is a thought process that is completely different to how we perceive and how we interact, it helps us to engage more effectively. We have a DVD, a film that you can watch on Vimeo called Sister Religions, which unpacks looking at Islam, and we don't have time to go into that, dhimmitude, taqiyya, and jizya, 3 terms within Islam that we really need to understand and grapple with as believers. We can put a link in the chat underneath the podcast that will take you to that. Because to give you another illustration, when we send international aid to an Islamic nation, it is not received as international aid. It is received as tribute money. We're better than you. Thank you for paying us.
Wow.
And that's, again, hard for our Western minds to comprehend because we've been so schooled in our generosity, because the Bible teaches us to be generous, that actually giving to those in need is something that is honored and revered and respected. But just because you've given in that way doesn't necessarily mean it's received in that way. It's received more as tribute money. And so what you are doing by giving international aid in these situations is actually reinforcing the Islamic supremacy complex that's within Islam. Does that make sense?
Let me read a couple things because I actually have some of the charter in front of me. 36 separate articles in Hamas's charter, all of which promote the basic Hamas goal of destroying the state of Israel through jihad. And they wrote it down in black and white like that. This is what boggles my mind. But one of the goals they say is this resistance movement is distinguished Palestinian movement whose allegiance is to Allah and whose way of life is Islam. It strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine. That's one of the things. Israel will exist and continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. Peace agreements. They actually wrote this down about peace agreements. These initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistance movement. Those conferences are no more than a means to appoint the infidels as arbitrators in the lands of Islam. There is no solution for the Palestinian problem except by jihad. Initiatives, proposals, and international conferences are but a waste of time and exercise in futility. So there's something for everybody who's out there saying, well, we need to talk more about a two-state solution. We need to, have a peace agreement. We need to listen. This, as long as these kind of people are in charge, it's not on the table. It's not even part of the conversation. And then, of course, you mentioned this, and this is the exact wording: the day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks will cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." All articles of Hamas's charter.